Development of the Ares 5 heavy lift cargo launch vehicle with a lift capacity far greater than the Saturn V of Apollo will carry the crew and lunar lander to the moon. Our target for the human lunar return is early 2020s. As with Apollo, our engineers and program managers have outlined a very deliberate and strategic plan for the Constellation program. This is the system of vehicles, Ares, Orion, and Lunar Lander. We collectively call them the Constellation system. To launch the infrastructure, once again, and send humans to Earth, beyond low Earth orbit. As we transition from the space shuttle to the new vehicles, and while 2015 seems rather distant, a number of significant first steps in this new program will be accomplished by the end of this year. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and the Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite, LRO and LCROSS, we do like acronyms, as we call them, a robotic mission will launch in June to go to the moon and map the surface of the moon and study and perform a chemical analysis on the surface of the moon in further detail. It's an interesting fact that we actually know more about the surface of Mars with all the wonderful science robotic missions to Mars than we do about the surface of the moon. Apollo landed at the equator, and we are targeting the South Pole to take advantage of the long periods of sunlight for solar power. If you remember, we're going to do it for 6 months of habitats. We have to be able to generate power. Solar power is one of the most economical ways you can do that. There's about 87% of the day of light on the poles, so that's why we're targeting the poles. Additionally, the Orion crew capsule and its number of crucial test phases and the Ares 1X test launch later this year will be the first flight of the new crew launch vehicle. We are making progress. One question I often get is, why is it taking so long to go back to the moon? It only took us 10 years in the 60s. And the answer is pretty simple. We are in a go-as-you-pay model. At the peak of the Apollo development, NASA's budget was nearly 5% of the federal budget. Today, we have less than 0.5% of the federal budget. So, vouching the checkbook, you can only do a few things at a time. So we definitely have a challenge in proceeding any faster. This constraint of the retirement of the shuttle in 2010 and bringing on the new launch vehicle systems in 2015 has created a gap. After 2010, after 2010, we won't have, the United States will not have any capability of going back to the International Space Station. This has people worried as well, and because we'll have to rely on shuttle Soyuz for crew rotation and Russian progress and the European Space Agency's Jules Verne for autonomous resupply vehicles. This will be the first time since Columbia that the United States has not had a capability themselves of going back to the International Space Station. Just yesterday, John Holdren, President Obama's science advisor, announced the creation of a Blue Ribbon Panel charged by Norm Augustine, a former CEO of Lockheed Martin, to evaluate the ways that we might be able to reduce this gap. Now, I kind of want to switch, and this is what's going on in NASA, and I kind of want to just walk through briefly about my career. One of the things I've tried to do more than anything is take advantage of an opportunity that are offered. Sometimes looking forward and you look at an opportunity and you just don't see any reason or any place for it in your career path. I've been there so many times myself, but when later in life, when I've looked back, the path was clear. I just didn't see it at the time. I began working for NASA at Langley Research Center as a graduate student under a research grant. I conducted research on the thermal protection system, which is better known as the shuttle tiles, for my master's thesis. When I graduated from college, I accepted a position as a materials engineer for the Navy in the Department of Defense. I transferred to Kings Bay, Georgia, because I had a wonderful opportunity to open a brand new lab at the submarine base to support the new Ohio-class submarines. Some folks have asked, how could you go from space to underwater? And surprisingly, the environments are very similar. In a submarine, you have a closed environment that has high pressure on the outside with the water. And in space, you have a closed environment with low pressure. You have to handle the environments exactly the same. I've always liked to challenge and try to continually stretch myself. I also try to be aware of my surroundings, keeping a keen eye on events occurring around me. While at Kings Bay, at the Naval Submarine Facility, Renault offered an opportunity to obtain a business degree. I pondered pursuing it because I had realized early on that business education plays an important role in the technical side of the world, particularly in the development of research proposals. This was an area that I wasn't familiar with, but as I said, I always like a challenge and rarely turn an opportunity down to learn new things. You just never know when or where that might be able to be applied, that new acquired knowledge. Achieving this degree opened doors in my career I never would have dreamed possible. A few years later, I transferred to Kennedy Space Center and led a research team in the development of ozone-cleaning alternatives to be used in cleaning operations of flight hardware. Sometime later, I realized I yearned for yet another challenge and transition to where I could use my experience in not a research setting, but assisting other scientists and engineers in developing better research proposals. By applying business acumen, the business degree now was at full throttle, thanks to Renault. This activity was recognized at NASA headquarters in Washington, and I was asked to transition yet again to the world of policy and strategy. I'm now able to apply both my technical background and my business experience. I just want you to be aware that NASA is not just with technical geeks. We have business, IT, philosophy, and other types of non-technical expertise that is needed so desperately. So if you want the experience of a lifetime, consider joining the NASA family. You are in charge of your life. You're in charge of your career. Take advantage of all the opportunities that you can. Obviously, sometimes the timing may not be right, but make every opportunity work for you and last for you. I'll close with a quote from Jacques Cousteau. His pioneering work in oceanography research did much to awaken us to the possibilities of the world of the inner space, which we explore today, just as NASA explores outer space. He said, if we were logical, the future would be bleak indeed. But we are more than logical. We are human beings, and we have faith, and we have hope, and we can work. Good night, and best of luck to your road to success.